Hi, everyone. So happy to be speaking with all of you today. Thank you, Sergey, for hosting me. And the topic of the day is behind the scenes of the world's highest converting checkout. So we're going to talk all things checkout today. The structure of the presentation will be kind of like this. I'm going to do a brief introduction, then we're going to dive into the anatomy of a checkout. We're going to talk about the 3 C's of a checkout, and we'll see what they are. Of course, we're going to talk about optimization of performance. That's why we all are here today. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&As and also the giveaway that Sergey mentioned. So hopefully you all put your names into the raffle bag. All right. So my name is Tanya Nam. I'm a staff solutions engineer with Shopify. My colleague Sam is supporting me here today, also from Shopify. Been with the company for 3 years. But related to this meetup, Sergey mentioned it's 15 years old, but it still feels young. And I've been coming here for a few times. And about maybe 3 or 3.5 years ago, I also gave a presentation on JavaScript for SEO because my previous company was an SEO company. The role of a solutions engineer is pretty interesting. I had somebody ask me about the role. So I don't have to write code all day long, but I do need to know the technical depth of the platform. And Shopify as a platform can span a lot of different disciplines, from payments to checkouts to front end to integrations with systems like OMS, IMSs, etc. So it's very interesting. I work on the enterprise segment, which means I get to talk to some of the big brands that you all know and heard about. Coming to Shopify, maybe they're already on Shopify. So it's been a fun ride. And today, I'm happy to share some of the learnings that I've accumulated over all those 3 years, specifically about checkout. So a little bit of it is technical. A lot of it is also kind of like conceptual and philosophical. So hopefully everybody in the room will find something they can take home today and appreciate what goes on behind the scenes at a checkout. A fun fact about me from the summer, I know it's September, we're all back to school, kind of feels like we're going back to our routines, but I was lucky enough to visit Paris this summer for the Olympics. So that was great. The event was actually really well set up. It wasn't as crowded or crazy as I was afraid it would be. One of the most beautiful things that I've seen there was the event under the Eiffel Tower, which was beach volleyball. So this is a shot from my seat at the beach volleyball. It was like my second night in Paris. There were 3 matches, 2 men's and like 1 women's, and the women's team was the US team, so we got to cheer for the US right there. So I thought that was my highlight of the summer of the Paris Olympics until I saw this. That was the event to be at the Olympics, and I missed that.
New York City made breakdancing, by the way. It's all started here in the city.
In New York?
Yeah, it all started in the city.
All right, maybe we'll have another talk about the performance of breakdancing. Maybe Sergey will break.
Definitely a performance.
You'll break a move, maybe. A little bit about Shopify in the web performance world. I know Sergey had speakers from my company. I'm probably not the most important speaker from the company, but you have me today, so you have to settle. But Ilya Grigorik from Google, and now he's at Shopify for maybe like 2.5 or 3 years as well. He's a principal technical engineer and an advisor to our CEO. I got lucky to find a little bit of time with him before my talk and like pick his brain on that. So hopefully I can share a little bit of this. But his book I brought with me. I call it the Bible. So a couple of you will get that today. It's also available online if you click on the link. And then recently, I think maybe a couple of months, 3 months ago, Shopify released a white paper specific around performance on e-commerce. It's also accessible online. So we have people optimizing everywhere from checkout to front end. Sergey has speakers from my company sometimes as well. You can find it on YouTube, so check it out. So to the topic of our presentation today, how bad is the problem? Do we really hate a slow checkout? Who left the checkout because it was too slow? Before, yeah, many times, a lot of us. So even today, in 2024, we still have this problem, apparently, with slow checkouts. It's not the number one reason why people would leave a checkout, but it is pretty high up there, right? So 22%, the study is recent from 2024 by this Baymart Institute that does research. So every one of 5 customers will likely leave the checkout if it's too slow. So it's still a problem. So let's try and deconstruct this problem together, starting from the very basic, going back in time maybe, and how we build those checkouts and why they're a problem today. So first of all, to kind of like understand together why checkout is such a unique thing online, it's a special snowflake because it's not an acquisition page. So optimizing checkout would be different from optimizing your home page, your collection pages, PDPs, landing pages, because at the time of checkout, the person is already on your website. So they found you, and they haven't bounced yet. It's also not a cart page. So at the cart page, maybe people will put something in the cart, leave it be, come back tomorrow, come back 3 days later, maybe never come back. So it's not a cart. What happens in checkout, the buyer or the visitor is about to become a buyer. They have their cart ready. They know they want this. They're ready to purchase. And for all those reasons, checkouts needs to be fast because the people are ready. And if your checkout is slow, you're going to lose them. So it's unique in that sense. If I wanted to build a checkout from scratch, and I wanted to ask you, that was like a recent screenshot. I don't know why they had this bird, but if I wanted to build it from scratch, like how would I go about this? And I asked Google, and I put it into the chat GPT and got some interesting suggestions. Make a business plan, like, okay, all I wanted to do is like to build my checkout, but apparently I need a business plan. AI tells me that. A lot of people recommend just like add a button and like don't even bother with it. Just use Shopify. We like to see that, but it doesn't solve my problem. Like, how do I build a checkout from scratch if I don't want to use Shopify? So lots of suggestions. And there is this very wise person online who says, as somebody who's built professionally proprietary e-commerce website, for the love of God, just do not build your own checkout. Who's built a checkout here before? I know. I talked to some of you, yes. Okay, so do you have a question? You have a comment?
I was going to say, yes, I have, sort of vaguely.
Vaguely?
Not anywhere close to the type of checkout this stuff.
Was it like selling things? Were you selling things? Like, was it working?
It was working.
Yeah.
We were selling things.
Oh, well, then you built the checkout from scratch.
But it was loans, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a little different.
So let's try and do this together. So take Jeff's experience. Maybe you'll have some pointers for us. But yeah, let's try and pretend that it's 1999. The internet is young. We have like no PayPal. We have nothing else, and we'll try to build our own checkout. So if we start doing this at the very basic, and sorry, the font is small. You don't have to read all of this, but at the very base, we need to have like 3 tables in our database to store cart, right? This is where stuff will go once we're ready to add something to our cart to buy. And then the next step from the cart will be checkout. So in the cart, we will store maybe the cart ID, items, a token of the cart, maybe like a visitor ID. And then when they're ready to check out, we'll pull this information into the checkout view, and then we'll add a payment ID eventually, right? Because we would need to get the payment gateway information, check if the credit card is valid, authorize the card, save the transaction ID, maybe save the payment ID into the checkout table, and then like put all the order information in here as well. And eventually, if the payment is successful, the checkout is going to become an order. The order is going to be created based on this checkout ID with this customer ID, whatever else we want to store, like order shipping, taxes, total, subtotal, discounts, all might go into this order table. So this is conceptual. Don't hold me to this infrastructure, the database structure, but at the very least, we'll have something like this. So if we start collecting this information, if we start collecting our payment information, this all needs to be wrapped in a layer. Hopefully you can see this. It says PCI compliant environment. So it has to live in the PCI compliant environment because you cannot store, at this day and age, you can't store your customer credit card data in plain text, although I've seen that before from building checkouts before. Don't do that. And then you have to add some front-end layer so your customers can see the checkout. There are going to be form fields where they will type that data. And then eventually you'll start adding integrations via likely an API layer to the payment gateway, to the tax engine, Maybe there is like a shipping calculator to fetch some shipping rates for your customers. Maybe you want to offer gift cards. Eventually, loyalty programs are popular today. So eventually, you'll start adding those like blocks and pieces, and everything needs to kind of work together seamlessly and integrate with all those parts. So like that person said, if you're trying to build checkout today, maybe it's not a good idea, just don't. Jeff, would you agree?
Well, I mean, entire businesses.
No, if you're down for it, you should totally do this. But somebody says like, don't do this, and like for the reasons that it's complex, you have to maintain, support, host it, provide those integrations. So how long did it take you to build?
Well, I just worked. I didn't start it from scratch.
You already like took libraries, yeah.
It's
It's true. Yeah, there's always like things to consider. But from going from the 1999 to early 2000s, I wanted to kind of highlight the most popular checkouts that still exist today. It's not an extensive list. It's just like we see them quite often, and most of you in the room know them probably fairly well. So the first one is Magento from 2008. That was founded. It's all from the Wikipedia, so don't hold me to those dates or numbers. It was acquired by Adobe. Now it's known as Adobe Commerce. It started as an on-prem solution, which meant you have to install it, configure it, and kind of like maintain and run it on your own servers. But now they offer SaaS. Demandware was the first one that was like kind of big in the SaaS area, right? So it was acquired by Salesforce. Now it's known as a Salesforce Commerce Cloud solution. We see a lot of that in like larger websites, enterprise type brands. So a lot of them still use like Commerce, Adobe Commerce or Demandware, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And finally, Shopify also started. It's interesting how they all started around like the same era, 2006. Started in Ottawa, Canada, went public in 2015. This is like the stack information, and Shopify is a SaaS model, meaning like we host it for you and you just run your business. The scale of those platforms may not be the exact numbers, but I think it should give you like kind of like an idea where they all are. And the reason Shopify has so many stores, for example, compared to Salesforce, is because Salesforce has always been catered to like a larger customer, to like enterprises, like bigger stores. And on Shopify, anybody, all of us in the room, we can start a website and start selling online in like a couple of hours. So it ranges from like the smallest to the largest. And Sam and I work on the enterprise segment, so we see the largest, but of course, anybody can use the platform. So we just talked about the older days, like 2000s. Now let's come back to the modern times and talk about what is comprising the modern checkout. Like what are the pieces that we'll see on a typical checkout online today? And this analogy is from Ilya. When I talked to him, he's like, it's kind of like being an air traffic controller when it comes to checkout. So as a buyer, online on the internet, you can imagine yourself as like, okay, like I add a product to the cart, I check out, and then I'm done. It takes like a few minutes. And similarly, if you're traveling somewhere on a JetBlue flight, as a traveler, you just go into the plane, you sit down, find your seat, put the headphones on, pick like a movie, get a snack. So your job is just to find a seat, and like the rest of it is abstracted from you. Versus this view from somebody in the tower that's overseeing the whole airport. So those people, air traffic controllers, need to know everything about how the process works. So how many runways do I have? How many flights do I have landing? How many of them are taking off? What are the weather conditions? How are the other airports around me? Like, are there any delays, and then have to accommodate for those? The types of planes. I don't know what else they have in their day-to-day, and they do it every day. And even on peak travel holidays, they have to make sure that the airports are running smoothly, so everybody sitting in that seat going on vacation can get there fast and like have a good experience. So I think the checkout example will be similar to what those air traffic controllers people do, orchestrating and like arranging everything to run seamlessly and fast and secure behind the scenes, so that us buyers can have a good experience online. So we're going to pretend we're air traffic controllers and deconstruct our modern checkout. So this is just a random website I took. It's on Shopify. It has like nothing special except for it has a lot of different fields. So we can go like block by block and see what is going on the typical checkout. So at the top, we see that checkout today may offer you express options, meaning that you don't have to go through all the fields, fill out like the whole form, like type your information. If you have like any of those wallets already available on your device or on your desktop, you can just go ahead and do like an express checkout flow. It's faster because it saves you time. You don't have to type this information. And this is just an example of how user recognition might work in one of those wallets. I'm going to use a ShopPay example because this is easy for me. So as soon as I enter my email information, there's going to be a call made to the ShopPay authentication mechanism. It is going to ask me, this is your information. Please authenticate yourself via the code. So once I do that, sorry, everything is pre-filled. I think it's the same screenshot. So everything is filled in, and I can just breeze through the checkout. Versus the guest checkout experience, I have to go through like all those steps and like fill out all those forms. It can be relatively fast these days, but it's still like not as fast as a express checkout. By the way, for all of you, people have ShopPay in the room. Yeah, the ShopPay wallet. Okay, I have a little surprise after the presentation, so we'll see how ShopPay, and I can explain how ShopPay works. Okay, so that's guest checkout experience. Oh, this is the wallet experience where everything is pre-saved, and all I have to do is just like click pay, and I'll be done. The next thing that we might see in the typical modern checkout would be once you start typing the address, it's going to be like a validation mechanism, validating your address and suggesting some of those streets. Shopify's checkout specifically is using Google. You don't have to use Google. You can bring like your own address validation and auto completion, but saves time again. So if you want the experience to be faster, if you want to use something that's already proven and works, you might want to use something like this. Once the shipping address is known, now that you filled it in, the checkout logic would know that it needs to fetch shipping methods and shipping rates. So depending on where you are in the country, you might have a choice of the standard shipping, expedited, express, and all of them can have like different rates. So again, a checkout can natively have access to all those shipping rates and methods inside the platform, or sometimes if you have a carrier and you want it to be calculated based on the weight of the package, I don't know, like destinations, it might also make a network call outside and then come back again with the rates that are fetched from a third-party system. So you have to consider that if you start optimizing your checkout, like where are my rates coming from? Email and SMS signups, that's pretty straightforward. I don't think too much is going on here, but it's usual to see those things nowadays. An important piece is collecting the credit card information. This is where you would integrate with a gateway, right? So once I fill in my credit card number, you would need to go to the payment gateway, validate the number, see if the card is still valid, etc. So there's going to be a call made at this step. Some checkouts also would offer you additional payment methods. So installments is a popular one. If you shop online, you can now like split your purchase into multiple installments. So some brands would offer this, so that'll be like another integration to consider. Discounts, I think we all love a good deal these days. Sometimes I wouldn't buy something if it doesn't have a discount attached to it. So people expect it now, right? So it's like a common thing. So discounts is another thing. You can have native discounts built into the platform, or you can have a discount engine living outside of your e-commerce. So again, could be another call. That is such a great point because we do this all the time. And like, do you know there are businesses out there like Retail Me Not, like their whole business model is built on those discounts and half the time they don't work. So it's much better as a brand if I show all of my discounts myself to my customers at a time when they're about to enter. Yeah, I love this point. Yeah. Yes, so if you click on it, it can pre-fill it, yeah. So you can share the URL with a discount already attached to it. And then at the time of checkout, it's going to show up automatically. Yep, you can do that. What else can we have at checkout these days? So we can have product upsells. It's not a new concept, right? Like have something in your cart, but then like those are complementary things that you should consider. But I think it's fairly rare to see that right in the checkout flow. So you don't have to go back to the cart and like add those things and then come back to checkout. Now, today you can add those product upsells directly in your checkout flow. So again, when the buyer is ready to buy, they might as well on the impulse add something else. This example here is like even a little bit more advanced than this one. So this one on the left-hand side for you is just like add a gift box. But this one actually offers you options. So you can buy something and select like which color, which size, which variant of the product you want to buy. So it's kind of like customized to the buyer, which is also nice. So you can have a choice of what you want to add to your checkout. And more than that, so sometimes if you sell something like beauty, cosmetics, pet food, I don't know, like shaving cream or whatever you buy like on a regular basis, a smart thing for you would be to also offer a checkout to upgrade to subscriptions. So it's not just like one-time purchase, but just like with a quick check, your one-time purchase becomes a subscription, which is like a selling plan, and every month or every 3 months is going to rebuild the same credit card for a subscription. It does, yes. It's a different transaction. So yes, exactly, because you have to charge the card on file eventually if you subscribe. Yes. Yeah, so it's kind of like a balance. You want to show the customer more options, but at the same time not slow it down too much, right? Like not to make them think. Loyalty is very popular these days too. So we have our favorite brands, and they reward their customers with like, okay, if you buy 10 times, next time you come, I give you like a 20% discount. So loyalty is another thing that we see quite often these days, where you have to be logged in because the checkout would need to know who you are before you can be rewarded. And again, you can do it right there in the checkout flow without leaving the page. Last but not least, an interesting topic is taxes. Whenever you build a checkout, you will have to eventually integrate something that will calculate the taxes for you and collect them based on what's in the cart. So each product needs to be classified according to the tax law based on who the buyer is and where they are in the country. So if they're in New York, they need to be charged a New York tax. Sometimes even the origin of a shipping is going to change how taxes are calculated. So pretty important. And usually with Shopify, at least, we have a native tax engine, but you can also connect to a third party. So it could be another call to a third-party tax calculating engine. Interesting. So it helps if you're selling from like a certain geo area. It's a big topic, yes. Like taxes and calculations. And if you sell internationally, it's going to be duties as well added to the calculation. Okay, so what we just covered, we're now at the step of a modern checkout, like what can go into the modern checkout, what building blocks, and like why they all are important in the checkout flow. So what are the 3 C's of the checkout today? And this is from Ilya again. He gave an interview recently to Stack Overflow blog, and the 3 C's of modern checkout today would be, the first one is conversion. Of course, you want your checkout to convert and make money. So conversion is the first one. The second one is compliance. Kind of boring, but important because it has to be compliant in order for your buyers to feel safe, in order for the whole world to work together. So your checkout has to be compliant. And lastly, checkout these days, they have to be composable. What does it mean? So if you're a brand A and you want to be different from brand B, the whole experience, not just your website, the look and feel, how the customer arrives to the website, which products, you want your checkout also to be unique and specific to you. For example, certain discounts you can offer just like as a brand A, and brand B doesn't offer this type of a discount. Your logo will be different at the very least, right? Like your treatment of the fonts and the boxes at checkout will be different. Maybe your shipping will be different as well. Maybe you'll offer something that like no other company out there would want to offer, and also translate it to your checkout experience. So composability is a big one. So you can make checkout extensible, unique, and specific to you. That's a great question. So the argument is like whether you want the checkout to look familiar, so you know it's safe and secure and like you've been through this experience before, versus it being unique to the brand, where the brand will show you something that's specific to them, but you may not be able to recognize it. Yeah. I think it's kind of like a great thought, and I think the answer is, well, I guess the answer, if I'm answering from Shopify, and I've seen a lot of Shopify checkouts, and you've seen a lot of them, they all look, so you can recognize it, right? It looks familiar, but at the same time, certain blocks can be specific to you, right? So you can expect to have your email address at the top, and then your shipping information, and then lastly payments. So it's going to go in the same flow. So you will never see like suddenly you have to enter payments before you enter shipping addresses. So in that sense, it'll be uniform, but in the sense where you can like have a little bit of control and say, I want to surprise and delight my customer with something extra that's going to be helpful to them, like an upsell, but at the same time will not disrupt the flow that's like familiar to them already. I think that's where the balance is, right? We'll have some examples here, so maybe you'll see those things in examples, but yeah, that's a great point, like to find a balance between familiar and composable. Okay, so we just talked about the modern checkout, but even like within Shopify's platform, we always try to optimize our checkout. It was always compliant, performant, it was user-friendly, familiar to everybody. But even like our team is trying to modernize checkout and make sure it's future-proof. And the reasons why we did that, why we moved from the old checkout, if you have been building on Shopify a little bit maybe, Brandon, you probably are familiar with this. Checkout.liquid would allow you to change certain things, access some of the DOM elements, add some third-party JavaScript in the checkout template. And the checkout.liquid only would allow you like a 3-step checkout process. And because you could add those like third-party JavaScripts and customizations, it was a little bit hard to maintain, because once you start forking your checkout and then we release a new feature, you either have to make sure everything is ported correctly, or sometimes it's too hard and you just say like, it's fine, I'm just going to run my old checkout and not even bother. So it was good until a certain time. So recently, I think about 2 years ago, but by now everybody on Shopify is using this new checkout version. We call it extensibility. So it gives you a lot more without compromising performance, security, compliance, etc. So you can choose between 1 and 3-step checkouts. You can extend it, and we'll see how we can do it in a little bit. It's extremely secure, PCI compliant. So if you're running your shop on Shopify, you don't have to do anything else to be compliant. Upgrades are clean because all of those third-party snippets that you can still extend your checkout with, they're run in the sandbox environment. So Shopify core updates the checkout, but your pieces are still yours, customized, and you can totally keep them running. And of course, performance is easier to control for us because we don't have any like third-party scripts. Suddenly, like we don't know like what's doing what. Everything is controllable. One quick word about PCI compliance. It's kind of like a boring topic, but next year, in April 1st, 2025, I think the new version of the standard is rolling out, PCI DSS version 4. So PCI is like a payment card industry, and then they want to make sure that everything on the internet that touches credit cards and like does credit card transactions, payments is compliant for the sake of all of us here. So every website with transactions will have to comply with their new standards. So we kind of did it ahead of time. So again, if you run a Shopify checkout, you're compliant. But of course, if you have like your own checkout, you're probably thinking about those things as well. Make sure you're ready for. So what happens if you're not compliant? You know, eventually they will fine you. Oh, okay. That would be pretty bad if you can't accept payments anymore because you're not compliant. Yeah. Yes. So one of my colleagues told me about mage cards. Anybody knows like what mage cards are? It's like a scheme. Some hackers created those cards or card injection scripts where you can inject it, usually in a Magento instance, and collect all this information. So yeah, those are the things. So that's exactly why they're trying to build compliance and rules around that. Okay, so so we talked about conversion, we talked about compliance, and next third C is composability. So you can do a lot of customization. So to the previous question, like you should be able to customize the look and feel, but still have like the form fields in the places where you would expect them. So with Shopify's branding API, you can now like have your own logo, you can have your own colors, the treatments of the form fields and the buttons and everything. It's customizable in the visual editor, which is nice, but if you need more control, branding API is also a way to customize this. Extensions, so this is where you can kind of like build your own, but in the areas where it makes sense. So let's say here you wanted to include your custom header, you would put it right here an extension point around the header. if you want to put something like below the express checkout buttons, there's an extension point here. So it's pretty easy to control what goes where. And then in terms of like what can go in those extension points, there are like a lot of components. This is just a handful. There's like a ton of them more. So if you want to offer a date picker is already there. Maybe you want to collect information for like a gift purchase for somebody. So it's like from this person to this person, and this is a gift message. So that's now possible. You can do like a lot more. I think this example that I have will show it a little bit better. So Monos is a brand that sells beautiful carry-ons. And what they also want to offer at checkout while they have this buyer, maybe they want to protect their new beautiful carry-on with a luggage cover. So without leaving the checkout, they built this extension right here, which will show them like all the options they can get in the luggage cover protector. This is another one. So if you want to add insurance and make sure that your luggage arrives safely, it's not going to be stolen in transit, you can also just check a checkbox. And then this will be added via an extension right here at checkout. So it's a pretty nice experience. On top of this, they also give you a discount. So for them, they decided that's how they want to extend their checkout, and works for them really nicely. Okay, so we talked about extending checkout kind of like on the front end, and it's visible like what's going on in the checkout flow with the front end and UI extensions. Sometimes those UI extensions can be powered by something that we call functions. So this is the super interesting topic to me. I was talking to Sam today, and he's like, oh, functions. So what are functions? You also brought it up as like something super interesting. Kind of, yes. So functions are, and those are the words from Toby, who's our CEO, who founded Shopify, and he said that he thinks that Shopify functions are one of the best features we ever launched. So we launched them maybe about 2 years ago. And when they launched, the whole company became kind of like obsessed with them, because that was the first time that people and developers on Shopify could customize the backend logic of checkout. So usually you have access to front end, you can inject some JavaScript a little bit, but to change the backend logic of checkout, now you can use this thing called functions to actually modify what is going on at the checkout, at the runtime of checkout. So what are functions? They're application modules that change the backend logic. They can be written in any language, but they have to compile to WebAssembly because they're running on the Shopify's managed runtime. So the popular ones are Rust. We launched with Rust, and then JavaScript is now the most popular one because everybody likes and uses JavaScript a lot. So once the functions are written and submitted to Shopify via apps, they will be hosted, and then of course, when the checkout runs, we will run them for the customers, for the brands. They do have limits on sizes and execution time, of course, and the reason being because they run a checkout, they have to be fast. We cannot just let them run forever and never finish. So there are some limitations on functions, but even with all of this, they're extremely powerful. We see like a lot of functions being adopted. The users are basically endless. You can think of something and like write it as a function. So we'll see some examples now. And like Toby said, it's possible. And the reason it became possible just recently is because with functions, we're using like the newest technology. So until the technology was mature enough, it wasn't possible to do that in the way like we do it today. And this is where the topics of optimizations will be super interesting because it's new. So the way functions work, we're going to take an example of a discount function. So when we think about discounts, usually you can give a blanket discount to all of your customers, like 20% off, and call it a day. But it's not enough today. The brands want to be pretty sophisticated in how they do discounts. So in my example, I want to give a discount to people who are on my websites only from New York City. And also they have to be in my loyalty program, right? So that's another condition I want to check with my function. And also I want to make sure that they have something in the cart that's like I want to promote. So promoted product in the cart. And on top of this, lastly, I also want to calculate it as a dynamic percentage. So if you've been a customer of mine for a year, I'll give you 5%. If you've been a customer of mine for 2 years, I'll give you 10%. So I want to multiply the number of years times 5% for my discount.
Let's add Sonia discount.
Could be, sure. Yes. So it's a non-trivial example, and this is a perfect use for functions because otherwise you cannot do this. So the inputs of my functions will be what's in the cart. So I need to know what's in the cart. And secondly, I need to know who the buyer is. So I'm going to feed this input into GraphQL. It's going to fetch my cart information and the buyer information and format it as JSON to the function input. So the input will go into the module, which is, of course, a WebAssembly module. It will run, and it's going to give me the output of the function as JSON. And the output will be the discount target, which in my case is an order. It's not a product discount. It's a whole order discount. And then the second output of the function will be the percentage calculated based on all those conditions. So this is how that might work. And who's responsible for which piece would be kind of like similar to this. So as an app developer, you will write a function. You will deploy the app. As a brand, the merchant, the store will install it to their store so it's available at their checkout. Maybe you want to configure the function and say it starts from like today until 7 days from now. Maybe you want to configure the percentages. Maybe you want to configure who your customers that you want to target will be. So some parameters you can configure. And then the function is set up to run the checkout. The customer comes to the website. It's going to interact with your site, add something to the cart. And then the function will run and determine whether they qualified for the discount or not. So that's essentially how the responsibilities of a function process would flow. Other examples, so we talked about discounts, but you can also modify shipping. If your customer is a VIP customer, they can get express shipping, everybody else cannot. You can rename a delivery option and say, like, all the continental US can get your product in 3 days, but sorry, Hawaii and Alaska, you're too far, you're getting your product in 5 days. You can validate what's in the cart. Do you have a question about? I love that question. It's a very deep and nuanced question. How do you test like which one performs better? So you can test today. We have the thing is called checkout profiles. You can create one profile and the second one, and like have the first one run for 7 days and the second run for the next 7 days. And those checkout profiles, I guess, will have to. Maybe you'll even have like 2 different functions running at those times. There are some limitations. We cannot do random. We cannot use randomization in functions. And for A/B testing, I think you have to randomize your audience.
Yeah, I was gonna.
I'll get back to that.
Yeah, I have the same question.
We're gonna get there. So if this audience understands it's a problem, we also understand it. So there are some projects that the team is working on around A/B testing, but it's super interesting because there are like variables you have to consider for A/B testing. And today we can do like 2 separate profiles, but they can be like running in parallel. You can like one at a time you can do them. But we're working on this eventually. Shipping functions can also be built. Validation, you can check what's in the cart and then like block the checkout process if something is like not compliant to the rules, so nobody can buy more than 3 items at a time. Payments is another one. So maybe you want to offer installments, but not to everybody. Maybe you want to offer installments to your customers who've been with you for a while. Maybe somebody is shopping from Europe and they have an additional payment method in Europe, but you don't want to show it in the US checkout. So you can customize payments. You can even change the price of items in the cart. So if you buy a top and the pants together at the same transaction, you can offer them as a bundle and give a discount on that bundle. So not only discounts, but you can do like a lot of other things with functions. Now to the, probably like this is the money diagram, I would call it. And the big thank you goes to somebody in our team optimizing checkout. Her name is Erin, and she's brilliant. And she allowed me to use this diagram, which she called a lasagna diagram, because there's like a multi-layer. So at the bottom layer of the lasagna, this is the perceived latency of the function from like start to finish. And today, it's 27 milliseconds, and the team is working really hard to make this number. If you think about milliseconds, it's like you wouldn't even like notice it, but the team is working on making this number even shorter and smaller. So they're working like microseconds sometimes, which I don't know, bogs my mind. And then if we start breaking down this function execution, kind of the first layer, we see that what we need to do first is we need to load the function. Then we're going to process the input, whatever goes in it, whether it's the cart, the shipping, the customer, whatever. We need to understand what the input is. And then lastly, once we know the input, we can run the actual WebAssembly module, the logic, and give the output back to the checkout. So the areas of optimization, if we start looking at the blue and the pink layer here, this actually works. So this area, this one takes about like 14% of the time. This one is about like 41, I believe. This is like 43, and this is like whatever single digit percentage time. So the team is kind of like, they're not working on this particular part this year, but the areas of optimization for functions will be those 3 areas, and they're really interesting and unique. So they want to optimize the serialization process of feeding the input into the function, as well as when I saw this diagram, like anything stands out to you, and I asked her, like, is this a dumb question? But like in this diagram, there are 2 big boxes. Why are they there? Like, can we just like get rid of them? And the reason why those 2 HTTP calls are here today is because the core, the checkout core, and the VM, they run like separately. They're not like considered like the same box or virtual box, whatever it is. So that's why there is a network call in between feeding the output into the function, running it, and then sending the output back. So she said eventually, it's not a dumb question, but they're working on removing that network call. So it should save us a lot of time. Could be. I don't know the reasons. Maybe that's how they set it up initially, and now they have to merge those 2 environments, and it takes a while because the platform is huge. So yeah, it's like way beyond out of my depth, but they're considering it. So maybe at some point in the future, we will not have those like 2 blue boxes here. And then like the last one is actually optimizing the runtime, which is also super interesting. And I'll show a couple of, or maybe 1 or 2 slides on this particular area. So we're going to talk about this one and this one, because we just discussed the HTTP like in combining runtime and core into one machine. The limit, I have the whole slide with numbers, but it should be not more than 10 milliseconds right now. So this is what, like, I don't know if you guys feel like this, but after I talked to Erin, I felt like, I told her, like, you're doing rocket science. That's what it feels like to me, because the functions, first of all, they're very critical. They're in the path of checkout. If you mess them up, you're just, like, ruining the whole experience. They're so fast, and the technology is, I think to me, is so new. They're still being developed, and that's why I feel like whatever they're doing, it's, like, super exciting and super interesting, and that's why I wanted to kind of bring it to you guys and discuss it today. So how they're optimizing, working on the input, working on parallelization, which is like not a new concept, but something to consider and do, running JS functions faster, and then reducing network overhead. Maybe it's a topic for another talk, but it's super interesting. I want to know myself now, like, how do they parallelize? In terms of improvement on the input, so now the input to the function is fed as JSON, which has been around for a long time, but it's not the ideal input for the function because it doesn't care if it's like nicely formatted, like what the fields are. So they're evaluating, maybe they're already building, using this binary format and optimizing even like the schema of the input data, which is Argo. Anybody heard of Argo? So it's kind of like binary format to feeding data into functions. So I do have a resource on Argo specifically from like GraphQL conference. I haven't had a chance to go through this, but it should be more performant, and it should be allowing the functions to take input in a more efficient format. Another thing they're optimizing for is a faster JS function. So functions launched with Rust. So it was the first language that was allowed to be compiled to WebAssembly, but now that we support JavaScript, we can see that the majority of functions are using JavaScript. So over almost like 3/4 of the functions are written in JS. And when you will take a look at the execution speed, the blue line and the green line, they're pretty far apart. So the green line is Rust and the blue line is JavaScript. So there is a lot of room to optimize JS. Anybody has any suggestions or experience? Huh?
Rewrite in Rust.
Sergey said rewrite in Rust.
What is unknown? What is unknown?
Oh, it's like other languages. It can be any language that compiles to WebAssembly. So to optimize performance of JavaScript, there's a consideration of like moving from Quick.js. I think that's probably where they started to SpiderMonkey, which I believe it wasn't an option before, but it's like one of those technologies that's like maturing and recently is like now able to handle functions. So as you can see from the chart, the performance is not quite where the Rust functions are, but it's pretty close. So maybe that's like one of the areas where we can go with optimization would be using SpiderMonkey instead of Quick.js. So again, you're asking all those questions. To me, it feels like rocket science, but it doesn't mean like I'm not curious. So I also want to go and find those answers. But yeah, I feel like it's like one of those areas today that is like really interesting and has a lot of potential. So we talked about checkouts. We talked about like all the bits and pieces. And the last thing I want to cover today is flash sales. So when you take all this complexity and throw a lot of people at the checkout at the same time, that's when they end up with the flash sale. So from the technical standpoint, a flash sale will be high volume of buyers on a single site and the checkout at the same time. Usually it will be related to somebody dropping like a pair of sneakers that only has like 100 of them and you have like 100,000 of buyers. Over 1,000 checkouts per minute, that's what we would call a flash sale. And after around like 4,000, 4,200 checkouts per minute, we will engage a checkout queue. And the checkout queue will be like a user experience. You'll see a message on the screen that will say you're in a checkout queue, but you are next in line. So you will not lose inventory. You're just going to wait until the checkout is complete. Yeah. Yes, so if it's attached to a checkout. Oh. So if you have multiple stores, like one for the US and one for Japan, and like you're selling in the US, it's going to be like a US checkout.
Okay. Or two completely unrelated businesses. Like.
Yeah. It's specific to your store. Okay. Yeah. And the reasons why brands and retailers and merchants choose to do a flash sales because customer loyalty, they want to reward their customers with limited edition products. The fear of missing out is like a very known thing that we all experience at one point, right? We want to get something that's like very limited and like nobody else can get it. Or sometimes they have a lot of inventory and they want to do like a big sale. So they say like the whole website is 50% off, but only for like 3 hours today. And people will rush to the website and that would trigger a flash sale. A good example of this was Mr. Beast. I don't know if anybody watches Mr. Beast video on YouTube. So he launched his chocolate brand called Feastables. I think it was like a year and a half or 2 years ago. And he said, like, come to my website, buy chocolate. But of course, people will not just go buy chocolate. But he said, in addition to that chocolate, you have a chance to win a jet ski, a brand new Tesla. Or you can come to my chocolate factory, like a Willy Wonka experience, and only 10 of you can come. So people rushed to the website, bought the chocolate, and there was a flash sale. But he does those things all the time. He has like millions of followers. Taylor Swift, anybody is a fan? So she also has a store on Shopify, and I think she also sold something this summer and triggered a flash sale. So the biggest kind of like event in the whole online commerce industry happens to be the BFCM on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And this is where we have like a real test on the whole performance infrastructure from like the front end to the servers and everything. So those are just like some of the numbers from 2023. You can see the functions were pretty popular. Lots of functions were running at checkout that year. At the peak, 4.2 million dollars in orders were flowing through Shopify's checkouts across the globe. This is global data. All the while, we're able to sustain pretty good uptime. And that was Las Vegas. I think Sphere was pretty new back then. So a few times a day, they would like show the Black Friday, Cyber Monday in Sphere. So that was pretty cool. Now, we covered a lot to summarize where can we optimize our checkout. Like, why are we even here talking today about optimization? We saw that there's still a lot of areas, starting with the front end. Probably a lot of you are familiar with just things like optimizing front end is still important. So it's important to serve your checkout close to the buyer from like a regional or local CDN. There's a front end team at Shopify as well. They're still working on optimizing the front end. So they do like skeleton rendering first and then like they fill in HTML, server-side rendering. So all those best practices are still relevant. There are teams working on them. For user experience, if you want to integrate other things into checkout, we talked about the shipping rate calculator, payment gateways, tax engines. So if you have a checkout, you better make sure that all those pieces are also performant because they integrate directly. A/B testing, to the question, that's like one of those areas that we're still working on in terms of user experience. And then lastly, the last topic was functions. So we need to make sure that the functions are fully optimized. We're also going to allow third-party calls from functions. So you can ping your own discount engine directly from the function. Of course, limited again to the time. It cannot take forever. You have to be pretty performant in order for checkouts to complete. So bless you. All those areas we're working on, and I think those are some of the more interesting ones in terms of performance optimization. No offense to front end, but I think like a lot of work still needs to be done here and here. And that's it. I hope today you found some information that was new to you or interesting. And thank you for being a great audience.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, very entertaining. I'm curious if there's an opportunity to run some of those functions on the client side, because then you take away that need to run in those 27 milliseconds on the back end, right? You don't have to pay for the infrastructure. At the same time, if the function has access to the entire context of the checkout, of who the customer is, what's in the cart right now, some of that business logic could run literally right there on the spot and be prefetched while the customer is just filling in, signing in, and things like that, right? So maybe has that been considered? Obviously, it wouldn't work for everything, but maybe some options.
Yeah. The question is, can we run some of this logic on the front-end client side? The answer is yes. We saw some of the examples. So product upsells in the checkout, they work as an extension, so they don't need to change anything on the back end. All they need to do is they can fetch additional products. We have a storefront API, which is like a front-end API. So you can just fetch that and display that and add them to the cart via front-end API without changing anything on the back end.
And that is done through the same functions?
They would not be functions. We call them UI extensions. I think it depends on the use case. If you don't have to change any logic on the back end, you can totally run it the client side.
So was that considered, or is that something that's...
It is considered. A lot of those extensions, they don't even touch functions, but we don't call them functions because they don't change the logic. So discounts will have to change how those discounts are applied, and those are not visible on the front end. So discounts is a good example. You can change discounts on the front end.
I want to add an important note here. It doesn't matter to the user where it runs if it's slow. So the fact that you put it on the front end doesn't necessarily mean that you are excused.
That's a good point. And also, if you had discounts available client side, everybody would just be adding their own discounts, maybe, in a sense.
You create a threshold. Certain functions obviously can only be run on the back end. But there are certain instances, so certain examples that even I think that you've shown, they could definitely run on the client side without any issues with security or with even somebody being able to hack around the function and do anything. Some of the functions are about upsell. Some of the functions are not necessarily about giving you something where you can save but more kind of to get you to buy more, right? So what stops those functions from being able to run on the client side?
You can implement a lot of things client side. Yeah, you're right. If you don't need to change anything, like with shipping or validations, or you can even do validations potentially with front-end functions. Yeah. So that's a good point. If you can avoid it, I think you should try and run it client side.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. So you had a slide comparing the old versus the new product, the old .liquid. Just curious, was that a completely new rewrite, or do you still have pieces of legacy that and if so, do you run into any issues with these new functions and extensions?
It was a completely new rewrite.
And also, were there organizational changes too related to that?
It was a big change. So we had to migrate everybody using old checkout to the new one, and it took a while, and we just recently completed that process. So it was basically a rebuilt checkout with all those features built in. So now you can have extensibility. You can have modular checkout. Everything is sandbox, so it's very secure. So yes, it was rewritten, the new version, and it wasn't overnight. It took a while. It was a process.
Back to the same slide. first, amazing job on the new checkout, and I a bit dived into that. But the only piece that I wasn't able to change is the product image or affect basically where the URL's coming from. Is there anything in the future where you allow to, let's say, decide where the media comes for the checkout? Because this is not available. You can do everything else, or at least allow to hide it and replace it something. But it sounds like a hack. But again, we don't have to maybe go to specific. But for me, that's a missing part because I cannot touch that.
So you want to show a different image of a product at checkout?
In media optimization.
Oh, you're in media optimization.
Bring it from different sources, not from.
So all the features are available to all plans. With functions, if you want to write your own, you have to be on Shopify Plus or higher or Enterprise. If you want to use an app that somebody else wrote using functions, you can install that app. But if you want to write a custom one with functions, you have to be on Plus. So we have an app, it's called Discount Kit, which will allow you to do like some non-trivial discounts. And if you install that on any store, that would work. But if you want to write your own discount application using functions, you have to be on Plus. I think so. Yes, they're trying to bring like everything as close to the buyer as possible. So I imagine I would say yes. If you want me to check, I will.
I have a more organizational question, actually. Like with so much customization, right? Like I think that's like was the core of your presentation. Like in those since '99, we changed so much. So we have so much customization, so much as part of this flow. How do you need to change organization to be aware of performance in order to not go wild? Did you have to perform any like SLAs, establish SLAs or something to not let your people ruin it?
Are you asking specifically about checkout or the whole platform?
I would say checkouts, like because of checkout is kind of like very different than everything else, but organizationally for the whole company too, maybe.
In terms of checkout, we don't ever run into kind of questions like, is it going to be performant? Because we've done a lot of research and testing, so the checkout is like the fastest and the highest converting. So the checkout piece, I think we don't get questions about like SLAs. In terms of the whole platform, the standard SLAs are online on the website, but if you want more than what we offer with the regular plan, even with Shopify plan, you can go with Enterprise. And that has like additional SLAs baked into the contract. If your question is around like coming from another platform to Shopify, like how do you consider performance?
No, I would say it's for all of the developers not to ruin the performance, I would say.
Oh, not to ruin the performance.
How is performance enforced internally within Shopify? Not to screw it up.
We can enforce it like as much as we can possibly, but then you have your own online store and you're gonna change something and you're gonna add things on top of this.
27 milliseconds. That's how you do it, right? Like just don't go over it. Right?
Yes, we will not let you go over. But it all depends. Like the function is one thing, but then like the front end is like a whole other conversation, and somebody can probably like do a better presentation on the front end than me. But yeah.
Yes, so follow-up question. So what happens if the function goes over 27 milliseconds?
We're just gonna give an error and timeout.
So the person who's on the shopping cart doesn't get to buy the stuff? Or?
If the function times out, it's just not gonna run. So it's not gonna apply a discount. It's not gonna apply the shipping, whatever logic. It's just not gonna run. And,
so the core flow will still go through.
The core flow will still go through, yes. And there will be an error going to be written into the function log, but the checkout experience you can still complete. It's going to time out and like not execute.
That's a very good incentive. Very good incentive for businesses, I can tell you that.
I mean, ideally you will test your functions, but yeah. Yeah.
Hey, so quick question. I'm honestly not that familiar with the checkout space. so this might be a bit naive. So you say like, okay, Shopify is the best performing checkout platform. So why do you believe that is? Is it because of the functions? Is it because of customization? I'm also kind of curious, kind of like what metrics are you basing it against? Like how much better is it as compared to some competitors? Once again, don't know the space very well, so I know that's a lot.
Yeah, I will start. Thank you for the question. It's a great one. Like, why is highest performing and fastest checkout? I'll start with the philosophical part, and then I'll go into like the measurements. So, Shopify's been around for 20 years, and it's a product-led company. So, if the product is not great, it's just like the whole. We have like two principles. Number one, make a great product, and the second one, like make money, and then never reverse the two. So the product has to be fantastic, and checkout is like the heart and like the bread and butter of like any online commerce. So Shopify has like a lot of engineers. I think the number we are allowed to say publicly is like over 2,000, but the actual number is more. So imagine like a lot of engineers working on just like one checkout product and making it fast and greatest. So it's development effort, it's experience. We've been building it for a long time. We have a lot of brands, and because we have like 3 million different stores, we see the whole range of experiences and the things that can go wrong at checkout, so we can kind of like optimize based on the data that we have across all those brands. So it's the amount of stores that we have, the number of engineers, the brilliance of those engineers that goes into building the checkout. So that's one part. And in terms of comparing it to other platforms, it wasn't me, but it was like a third party. What do we call it? It was like a third party study conducted that would compare checkouts across multiple platforms, and then without like bias, independently give results. So that's how we know it's the highest performing, because somebody else, like a third party, conducted the research and like gave us the numbers.
Yeah, my question relates around the functions. How complex do you see your users rewriting these? Like, are they simple conditionals, or do they contain more complicated logic?
I think it can be both. It's not difficult. Sam, have you tried? So Sam was with Shopify. He just joined us this is like week 4. So he's going through onboarding, and like maybe you dove into those functions, but they're not difficult to write. I have an example. Let's see. Yeah, so they don't need to be complex, especially if you use JavaScript. We have like some templates that you can get started with and take a look how they're written. So that's one. And the second one is somebody on our team just built a checkout function, like doing an additional item adding an item to the cart based on like the order total. So he describes it how he wrote it with JavaScript. So it's pretty friendly. It's developer friendly. It's very easy to get started with. And then you can go as complex as you want from there. Yeah, and if you have like 3 items in the cart, that's fine. But imagine you have like 300, and you have to look through them and check like if they qualify for a discount. Yeah.
With 27 milliseconds and the addition of the external APIs that you mentioned that's coming in the future, how are you? Is the latency of the external APIs going to be included in those 27 milliseconds, or is it? Once you make the request, the function is suspended. When the request comes back, then the 27 millisecond timer restarts or continues at that point.
I think we'll have to account for the time that the call is going to be made. So it's going to be pretty strict on like how long they should take. I don't have the exact numbers. And again, we put like a caveat and say, if you really want to use third-party calls, it's on you to make sure that they execute fast. So I think there are going to be some guidelines. I don't have the number today. But there will not be like big numbers. It should reasonably execute really fast, those third-party calls.
I think I might not be understanding the functions that well, but is it like 10 milliseconds per function, or?
It is per function, yeah.
Per function?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, there are limits on the input, on how much input you can give to a function. There are limits on like the memory and like the stack memory. So it's all online. I think I have it somewhere in the deck as well.
Don't compile moment.js into your Rust function. That's a thing.
Yeah, that could be another session, because we say we can run up to 100 functions at checkout at the time, but like how they all orchestrated would be another topic. Yeah.
Okay, I think we will leave the rest of the questions for the networking phase. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you very much.